Well, now we're going to talk about stoves, and I have laid out in front of me and on the pictures here 3 main types. We've got canisters, and there's 2 subsets of canisters. There's the integrated, like the jet boil, and down there in the lower middle left of the screen, you're going to see a non-integrated, so it's got a separate pot. We have our white gas stoves with the bottles, and the MSR wind burner is what I have here. And then over here, I've got an alcohol stove, and it burns denatured alcohol, methyl alcohol. You can get it in the yellow heat containers, and you can also use Everclear, but that can be a little problematic if you're not 21. I highly recommend canister stoves, and we're going to show you why here in a second. You can get integrated or not. They are the most user-friendly. So integrated is going to look like the jet boil there, where the pot and burner and everything all kind of twists together and goes on your fuel canister. And then non-integrated is just going to come with the stove itself, which is that little burner piece you see on top of the red fuel canister there. And you're going to have to buy a pot separately. So sometimes they'll sell them in kits as well, so you get the stove and pot all at the same time. And for the most part, you don't have to worry too much about different brands of canister fuel. They all work fairly much the same. Non-integrated are usually cheaper and lighter. Your integrated ones like jet boil, MSR makes a couple integrated ones, usually have better performance in poor weather. These kind of stoves are going to be in the middle of the pack by weight. They do get pretty light, and they can get kind of heavy too. But generally, they're going to be lighter than your white gas stoves, but heavier than your alcohol stoves. For liquid fuel, white gas, also you can burn kerosene in them. Depending on the stove, you can burn gasoline in them. These are going to be the heaviest, but they have the best cold weather performance. If you're doing a lot of international trips, these have the most readily available fuel. Like I said, you can get models that will do kerosene, that will do gasoline, and even white gas is pretty popular. I have one. It was the first stove I got because I knew I wanted to do winter and mountaineering, and now that's the only time I bring it out is if I'm gonna be on snow and I'm melting snow for water. There's a little bit of learning curve. You have to prime. That's the priming pan in the bottom, in between the legs there. You also have to pump the bottles. And you start throwing in your pot, your fuel bottle, and your stove. These become also the most expensive. Last but not least, you have the lightest option, which is alcohol stoves. I say not recommended for 2. You could use it for 2 people. You have to be a little bit more patient. Uses denatured alcohol, not the kind you drink, though you can use Everclear. Or, you get the yellow heat cans. They are slow to boil. You really have to plan out your meals, your drinking, how many times a day you want hot water. There's some learning curve with priming them, but they can be really cheap. There's a picture there on the top of the screen with somebody made one out of an old soda can. Or you can get really expensive, which actually, take that back. The stove, the custom, the titanium model there, the Vargo, that's what I have. It's in the bottom picture on the right. That stove is actually like $35. But when you throw in the windscreen, you can make your windscreen yourself, or you can buy a windscreen. They can get more expensive, and you still have to consider what pot you're going to use. So before we get into the demo, what questions do we have?
Casey, one of the questions is, do you have to have one pot one stove per person?
No, I would recommend, depends on your application, but I think a jet boil can easily handle up to 3 people, depending on how big the jet boil is. Your MSR wind burner can handle 3, 4, 5, depending on how big your pot is. And even the tiny alcohol stoves will get down to 2 people. You can get up to 2 people in them, but they are slower, and you're gonna have to plan out your meals a lot more. So give me one sec. I learned my lesson from the last class, and I am going to pin my video on the main iMac computer so that it records it big rather than small.
If you're reading in the chat, you can see some other answers from Steve and Sarah on the packing of the stove or sharing of the stove, I guess. Any other questions on the stoves? Sarah's asking, so the lightest, most reliable stove is ... the jet boil? Question mark? Casey?
In terms of lightest and most reliable, I mean, they're all fairly reliable. The alcohol is going to have worse poor welder performance. The MSR is pretty much indestructible, pretty hard to break it, and it's got a field maintenance kit that you can bring with you. I have not had any problems with the jet boil either. I don't know, Steve, what do you think?
On mute. I would say the jet boil is the easiest stove to use, which matters if you're tired and hungry. And it also is the most efficient in terms of how much fuel it uses. So if you're on like a week-long backpack, I went on a 12-day trip last summer on a 1 4-ounce canister with my jet boil. So very efficient. It is not the lightest, but in my ultralight gear kit, I use a jet boil because I appreciate the convenience and the fuel efficiency.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Like I said, I started out with the MSR wind burner because I knew I wanted to be in mountaineering, and I was in the Army, and I didn't think a 50-pound pack was that heavy at the time. And so I just got this. And I was like, I'm only going to get one stove and it's going to do everything. Okay. And then I got really tired of that. And I got really tired of 50-pound packs. So I switched to the Vargo titanium alcohol stove. I did use it on the Wonderland Trail, and it worked out great for me, especially because I was in a 3-person group. And so we had 2 stoves. So I ended up using it kind of solo. And that worked out great. But like I said, you really have to plan out how many hot drinks you want per day, what your meals are going to be. And there's not a whole lot of convenience about like, maybe I do want an extra cup of coffee, because it takes forethought. So finally, 2 years ago, I just used my REI dividend and got a jet boil, and I'm never going back. Okay, any other questions in the group chat?
Casey, there was one other question, probably for Steve, and the question was, is there a way to lighten the 10 essentials? That's a great question. Unmute yourself, Steve. We can't hear your wisdom.
Sorry, okay, yeah. So there are really light knives. my pocket knife is like 2 inches long or something, a little Swiss Army knife, and it has several other features. Super light. My headlamp is just tiny. It weighs an ounce or something. I found I had a more powerful headlamp on the PCT, and the only time I needed a lamp was around inside the tent when it got dark. And even if I got out in the middle of the night to pee, that little headlamp is fine. So yeah, you can save weight there. And the first aid kit, yeah, 3 ounces is plenty. For fire starters, yeah, I have a little book of matches, and sunglasses, clothing I'll talk about later. For navigation, I have my smartphone, and then a map. I don't bring a compass. And then nutrition, yeah, I don't go for the freeze-dried food. You can, but you can get food that's almost as light and as nutritious without going the freeze-dried route. So really, it's in the pack, the sleeping bag, and the tent where you save the most weight, and that's for a separate class.
Thanks, Steve.
All righty. Thank you, Steve. I am going to go ahead and zoom in the camera and demonstrate some stoves. So here, we're going to start out. We're going to go from slowest to fastest. So how's that looking in terms of focus? Should be focused on the alcohol stove. This is nice because it all is in this one package. I'm going to say it's the lightest weight. Pops out. Here's the stove itself. It is that big. You'll notice I have a piece of wood down on my plastic picnic table here because it will burn the ground underneath it, or the plastic underneath it. And so you need to consider that when you're setting up camp and when you are choosing where you're going to set it up. A little bit of alcohol, denatured alcohol right here, keep it in a little bottle. This stove is nice because I used to carry one of those like cough drop or cough syrup measurers. This stove is nice because you can just pour stuff in there and you're supposed to fill it up every time. And after the first few times, you kind of get to know where that line is. And then you can and then this is what I meant by it gets a little bit spendy when you start putting in custom windscreens. You are going to need a windscreen if you choose to use an alcohol stove. There's no way to get away from using one. So it snaps together just like that. I'm gonna leave it off the side for a second. And these are the little pot supports. Still kind of see what I'm doing. So I'm putting these little rods through the holes in the windscreen. And that is what's going to hold my pot. Before I get it all lit, put some water. And I like to use smart water bottles. I like the shape of them. They're pretty durable. And about half of them is 2 cups. So 2 cups is a pretty standard measurement. A lot of your meals are going to be 2 cups, maybe a cup and a half, and then you have half a cup for coffee or something like that. Then I'm going to get it all set up. So I'm going to get everything all set up. I'm going to grab my lighter. It's right here. And that's the other thing. about fuel. Oh, is it? Are we supposed to see a little bit? Let's turn the lights off. You will see it will burn blue. Can we see that?
Yep.
Yeah, we can see a little blue. In bright sunlight, you're not going to be able to see it. So you're going to have to put your hand over there and just see it. Like, is it going? Is it going? And that can also be problematic. So now that's going to go. Put my windscreen over it. I'm going to put my pod over it. And now I'm just going to let that go. One of the things I liked about using it solo was that now I've got 5 to 7 minutes. I can go set up my tent, blow up my sleeping pad, whole 9 yards, or play around with these other stoves. So on these MSR ones.
Hey, Casey.
Yes.
Quick question, Stanette. Don is asking, are there areas that restrict the use of liquid fuel stoves?
Not these liquid fuel like MSR ones, like these ones, but there are places that will restrict alcohol fuel stoves. A lot of places consider this an open flame.
Thank you.
So first things first, when you got some fuel in here, you gotta pump this one. About 20 pumps, give or take, depends on how full it is. It feels like it's only about a quarter full. I like these Tokes titanium pots. They're pretty reasonable as far as titanium goes. Snow Peak's pretty expensive. But I really like the, oh, there we go, it bloomed. Let's see if I can show it to you. So it bloomed, and so now, I don't know if you can see on the video, it is coming out of the jets on the side rather than in the center. And so that will increase the heat output. Okay, go back here. And now this stove is so big that it can't fit in its pot. It does come with a windscreen. It does come with its own base. And it comes, that's how big it is. So you fold these legs out. Still on the camera, there we go. So I'm going to have to connect the hose, here, this braided metal hose, into your fuel bottle. And then, and it does have a required orientation. I just noticed, I just had to pull it back out. On bare ground, this little pad, this little base plate probably isn't that important, but on snow, it's very important. We're just focused on 3-season backpacking here. Probably not going to worry too much about snow. So for I use a big wide pot. This is a 2-liter pot. Much easier to melt snow when you have a wide base as opposed to a narrow base. On this one, I got my water in my pot. Put that up. So on this one, I'm going to open it up until, here's the nozzle. How are we doing? We can still see. Until, there we go. Now I'm closing it again. And I've just waited until I got liquid fuel here in the priming pan at the bottom. So right here in the bottom of the priming pan, there's now liquid. Got my lighter again. I'm gonna light that. This is what I mean, there's a little bit of a learning curve, especially on these guys. You gotta wait and be patient. And I'm gonna make sure you get that hot enough And once I hear it, there it goes. It bloomed up top. Now I'm going to open up my fuel again. And we're going to let that, don't get scared. I'm going to let that burn off. And we're going to close down the fuel a little bit more. On this side. I almost had it bloomed.
Yeah, Casey, question is, that looks like an open flame to me. So I'm just curious. And so is Laura, is that not considered an open flame, but the alcohol one is?
Not when we get it going. So the alcohol one, there's no way to stop the flame. Let's see. There we go. There we go.
I think part of the problem with the alcohol stove is if you kick it over, you're spilling fuel on the ground, and then you have a real problem.
Oh, that makes sense. Thank you, Steve.
So then,
Hope that helps.
yeah, so did everybody get a chance to see how that was bloomed now? And now we got it. Now it kind of sounds like a jet too. Can everybody hear that? So now that's going. Also comes with a windscreen, which I'll leave alone. And so we still have not boiled on the alcohol stove yet. We're getting some soda bubbles though. It's getting there. And now, last but not least, I pop out my jet boil. Let's move the camera a little bit over. So it all kind of fits together. One of the first timers will get scared. There'll be a hiss when you first pop the seal on your fuel bottle, and it could scare people, but just keep turning, it'll go away. Pop that bottom off. It will come with these canister supports. Sometimes they're nice, sometimes they're not. Looks like our alcohol stove is boiling. We've got a roiling boil on the alcohol stove right now. So I don't know if anybody was timing that. This is what I mean by integrated, in that it snaps in, the pot snaps in right to the stove. It's beautiful. And then, so I'm just gonna pop that, throw some water in there. Jet boil pot actually comes with markings on the inside, so that's pretty handy. And then I'm just gonna turn the fuel knob here until I hear a hiss. And I'm gonna hit the igniter there. Hey, hey, we're boiling. Let's turn the fuel all the way up. I want to speak a little bit loud. Can everybody hear me okay? Or 'cause I'm getting a lot of noise here in my, from stoves going.
Loud and clear.
Great. So let's see if the jet boil beats the wind burner. It definitely beat the alcohol stove, but we started out with that one first. But everybody saw how easy that was to set up, right?
Winner, winner. Hey, Casey, quick question on the alcohol one. Does the windscreen come with the stoves? Like, does it come together, or do you have to get that in addition to getting the stove?
We're boiling on the white gas. Depends. You can buy the stove alone, or you can buy the whole setup. So we just boiled on the white gas and wait for it. We are almost at boiling on the jet boil. We're getting close. Not quite a roiling boil yet.
So the jet boil is fast because it has a heat exchanger at the base of the pot. And then it also has insulation around the outside of the pot. So it doesn't lose much heat. It almost all goes into boiling that water.
I would say, yep, there we go. We are at a roiling boil on the jet boil. So I was thinking about making more slides, but I felt like probably just a demo would be worth 1,000 slides.
It was awesome.
And then it's real easy to shut the jet boil off just with the little fuel thing there. The wind burner also just kind of twist the knob on the fuel bottle, let it burn itself out. The alcohol stove. There's another. Let's go back over here. The alcohol stove is a little bit more problematic to put out. Let's put this over there. And then, there we go. You have to blow it out. Now you have you can reclaim your alcohol fuel from this model of stove, but you have to wait for it to cool. So now I'll put my boiling water in my mountain house or my pre-made dehydrated meal, and I'm gonna eat it while I wait for this to cool. The jet boil, pretty much, I'm just gonna grab that and pop it off. And it's insulated on the outside. It's got a nice little koozie on it. Has a nice little pour spout here that I could use if I wanted to pour into something. And I wanted to pour some more water in here. My mountaineering pot also has a little kettle spout to it. This little tiny guy does not. Yeah, melting snow. Great. Winter applications, great. Jet boil, most convenient, easiest. If you want a cup of coffee and you didn't plan ahead, doesn't matter. Just throw some water in there and get it hot again. Alcohol stove fuel, lightest, easiest, tiny little guy. The lightest, cheapest, tiny little guy. You have to plan ahead and think ahead. You can't just fire up a cup of coffee in 2 minutes and call it a day. So what are your questions?
Casey, one of the questions are, do you have costs? Uh-oh, just a second, I lost it. What are the costs of those different types of stoves, roughly?
Oh, it's been a while. I've had all of these for a couple of years now. So it's been a while since I've looked at costs. I think jet boils are about $90 for some of the cheaper ones, and they get up into the 140s for the fancier models. I think the wind burner, which I don't remember if the wind burner comes with a fuel bottle to start out or not. I don't think it does. So I think for the wind burner, you're probably looking at $80. Then you got to pay another $10 for the fuel bottle, and then you got to get a pot. You get your pot from anywhere, but so pots are pots. And then same thing with the alcohol stove. I think this whole setup cost me around $120, everything. I bought it as a kit, but and it's titanium, everything, even the windscreen is titanium, so that's why it was so expensive. Like I said, you can build an alcohol stove setup out of a pop can if you want. And there's YouTube videos to do that. Like I said, though, I've used every style fairly extensively, and jet boil wins hand down. Or any, like, I also had a Snow Peak Gigapower, which is the non-integrated stove that I used to use with this pot. And I went non-integrated when I switched to canister because I felt like it would be more versatile. I was like, oh, I'm gonna put my stove on a campfire maybe, or since we always have a campfire, I'll put my pot on a campfire and I'll just save my fuel. It never works out that way. The campfire is gonna take you 10 to 15 minutes to boil water. if you get it boiling at all, and you got to start making a platform and all sorts of other jazz. And at the end of the day, it's just easier to put it on your stove and boil your water.
Okay.
I don't do a whole lot of backcountry cooking. Pretty much everything I do is adding hot water to dehydrated meals. I will go with Mountain House. I also make my own. So I guess if you're looking to do more like gourmet style cooking, you're going to want something that can simmer. So some of the more expensive jet boils, you can adjust the stove down a little bit so it's not just blasting heat to boil water. The wind burner is pretty hard to adjust down, but you can do it. And then the alcohol stove doesn't burn that hot anyways. I've also seen people use those little, I forget, those little candles that you put in, that restaurants will put in the glass centerpieces. I've seen people use those if they're trying to be more gourmet cooks. But I personally prefer just putting water in my pots, because as soon as you start getting food on it, you have to start washing it. It's more trouble than it's worth for me. And especially if you start making your own dehydrated meals, you can get pretty tasty without having to worry about actually getting your pots dirty.
We have some more questions. Are you ready?
Yes,
Okay.
bail on me.
So the weight, I think we got the weight, Dory, the weight for the 2 cups, Dana said is 13.1 ounces. Casey, here's one. Is there much advantage to having something that is versatile for the type of liquid you're heating? Like, she's only gone car camping and have used the 2-burner stove. So when you go to backpacking, is there much advantage to having something that is versatile for the type of liquid you're heating? Is that clear enough for you? Or
can you clarify type of liquid? Do you mean type
Laura,
of fuel or type of fuel liquid in the pot?
Oh, good. Laura, can you unmute yourself at all? You might be muted by the team, but Laura, if you can unmute yourself, go ahead and answer Casey's question there. And then Casey, I have several more for you. Let me see if I can find Laura. If you don't see Casey as the main part of your view right now, you can double click on his little tiny picture and he will pop up to a bigger picture, and you might like that. I saw somebody said that Casey was very tiny. So if that's true for you, you're in the gallery view and you just need to double click on Casey's picture and it'll pop up into a bigger view. Let's see if I can find Laura. Are you there?
I am. I've only gone car camping and a little bit of backpacking where someone else was in charge of the food. So I guess it might be getting ahead of myself to ask, but is it worthwhile having one where a normal pot sits on?
I guess it depends on what you mean by normal pot. So I've got this guy.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can, yeah, so that looks like a normal pot, but it's smaller, and it's all titanium, so it's lighter. So it's not something I generally could use it in the kitchen, but usually it hangs out in the garage. Same thing with, let's see, let's pull this guy out. So that's also a little tiny Toke's titanium backpacking pot. The handles, come around here. The handles will fold in to make it so it's easier. Ooh, that's still kind of hot. So it's easier to pack. But if normal like pots, separate pots can be cheaper, especially if you're looking at like anodized aluminum or even some of the steel pots. But you run into drawbacks in terms of poor weather performance, wind performance versus an integrated canister stove where the jet boil sits right on the stove and this protects it from the wind as well. Did that answer your question?
It did, thank you.
All right, Casey, Shelley's asking, do you need some kind of mitt to pour out of those pots? They look like they must get very hot. yes, I've used several things like a washcloth and maybe a sock. But Casey, you can answer that one.
Yeah, I usually bring a little tiny microfiber towel. It's multi-purpose for me. I can use it as a quick tourniquet if I need to. I use it to get dew off my sleeping bag or dew off my tent before I pack it. And I also use that, I'll fold it and use that as a pot grabber. You don't necessarily, like, they're not that bad, especially like this, that's not too bad. And that one, this little guy has rubberized handles. They still get a little hot, but it doesn't bother me too much. And the jet boil's fine. Like, you can grab the jet boil almost any time, as long as you're touching the insulation or the handles.
And there's a comment, I think Sarah sent this to me, but maybe to your point, Laura, the Glacier Camp Stove does allow you to cook things other than just boiling water, but a lot of us just boil water. Oh, whoops. Maybe I see your second message there. Let's see. Also, we've got some prices. Some people are dropping in. So if you were one of the people who asked about prices, it looks like Will and Yes are dropping in some prices. REI, Sportsman, and let me look. How long does the gas?
Steep and Cheap is a pretty good.
Pardon that? Pardon me?
Steepandcheap.com is another pretty good one.
Steep and cheap or sheep?
Yep. Steep, like mountain steep.
Okay, got it.
STEEP and cheap. All one word.
Awesome. Don is sharing some of his expertise there with what he uses. Sage is asking, how long does the gas on the integrated jet boil last?
I think 6 days is what I've heard consistently. Steve, you could probably use it. I typically don't go on a long enough trip to where I have to worry about it.
As I said, I went 12 days this summer on 1 4-ounce canister. And that's boiling typically probably 3 cups a day. 1 cup in the morning and 2 in the evening.
All right. Dana has dropped some information in there about an MSR that has a pocket rocket stove at REI. And so you can ask Dana some questions about that. Oh, Laura's saying the sterno. Yep. Let's see. I'm just looking for the questions.
I guess I don't typically recommend fuel gels or tablets. There are some stoves out there. Every time I've seen somebody use them, they come away disappointed.
I'm not sure, I know if you're asking the question or sharing your information, but mountaineering back, I don't know you, Anu. Where are you? Saying mountaineering and backpacking in general, the middle one works fine, question mark. There's a little learning curve, but it will be more versatile. So I'm not sure if you're asking, clarify that for me so that I can phrase that to Casey, or maybe you're sharing your wisdom. Thank you.
Yeah, you can hear me?
Oh, yes, thank you.
Yeah, great. So yeah, I was actually looking for a versatile stove. Like there are 3 options which Casey demonstrated, but I was looking for like which one is more versatile, like in mountaineering and backpacking.
Okay, perfect. So Casey, if you're going to do mountaineering and backpacking, which one would be most versatile for the use? 2 for 1.
Yeah, so if you're going to do mountaineering and backpacking, the wind burner, the white gas stove, is going to be, it's going to be heavy for backpacking. It's going to be my preferred stove for mountaineering. Now, their MSR makes an integrated canister stove. It is not the wind burner, the whisper light. I'm sorry, I've been saying wind burner this whole time. It's actually an MSR whisper light. The MSR makes an integrated canister stove. It is not called the wind burner. There is another one that is very popular for quick overnights, like Mount Adams, Rainier, if you're doing it in 2 days. And it does have better, I guess, snow melting per gram of fuel than the Whisper Light, but it's also really expensive. I think it's like $250. So this Whisper Light is going to be heavy for normal backpacking, but it's going to be my preferred stove for melting snow during mountaineering.
Okay.
And so I
I'll
think
just-
we're running into.
I'll just
Go ahead,
add to
Steve.
that. I would say the disadvantage of a canister stove is that it doesn't work well when it's cold. And so if you are going up in the mountains and you're camping on snow and it's, you know, below freezing, then yeah, you want a stove like the MSR. But if you're climbing mountains and it's not cold, I would still go with a jet boil. The convenience is there, and it'll perform just about as well, as long as it's warm enough.
Yeah, I've been up on in Camp Sherman and Camp Muir when it's 50, 60 degrees up there, and the sun's shining, and we had a Boy Scout troop right next to us and just had a big row of jet boils going to melt snow for water.